Hi everyone, and welcome to the finalist voting for the Maven Music Challenge. Today, we'll be looking at the 5 projects up for the main prize, and we'll be evaluating them by using the challenge objective, which was to use your streaming history to spin your own version of Spotify Wrapped. Now, as always, we'll consider each project as a whole, including the description, images, and embedded reports. So let's get started.
So I'm going to try really hard not to be overly dramatic when I say this, but this is probably one of my favorite projects that I have come across in a long time, and that actually might be an understatement. Jurgen's Spotify Wrapped project is definitely a really strong entry, and not just because it looks like a DJ mixer, which you can kind of see in this picture up here. I'll kind of make you wait for just a second to dig into the actual data visualization. 'Cause it's not just fun to look at, but it was also just a really well done about this section or about this project section too. So Jurgen really hits on like the big topics that I like to see mentioned in a project like this. He kind of mentions, why he chose the data visualization he did. He said he wanted this to reflect a feeling of discovery. And at first sight, a DJ mixer is overwhelming, but once you get the hang of it, it's an amazing tool. I think you will also see that his project kind of follows that same kind of line of thought. But he also kind of talks about the data preparation, what he did there. And then he kind of talks about the main indicators and what he chose to display. Didn't go into a lot of why necessarily, but I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So looking at the actual project, I actually originally thought it wasn't loading properly for me. I kind of waited for a second and nothing was happening on the screen. But I went back and reread Jurgen's About This Project section and realized that he had this really, really clever on-off switch here. So once I saw that, I was able to get a really good look at this project. And there is so much information to be seen here. So I would strongly encourage you kind of go poke around yourself, play around with it. Jurgen reviewed 6 years of Spotify data from 2019 to 2024. And even before touching any of the filters, you see a ton of information. So we're seeing, the number of artists that he listened to. We're seeing kind of the top 5 songs, the percent of songs that he skipped here within 30 seconds of the song starting, the number of days that he listened to Spotify. So really just a ton of information, just like right off the bat. So from there, I have so many options to play around with that it's a little overwhelming. I can choose a specific month or multiple months to look at, and we can give that a second to upload or update, and then you can kind of see that all of these charts are updating along with it. I can look at the specific or the difference between number of songs versus the distinct number of songs played. So that's a really cool kind of feature. I can change both the number of results up in this top middle section. So I can see, instead of the top 5 songs, I can now see the top 10 artists in the same time period that I have reflected in these filters here. I can also see a couple of different trends, like when Jurgen listened the most or how long he listened to songs. So for instance, if I click on the when filter here, we're going to see this heat map. How long I can see in number of days, hours, or minutes, how long he listened to these his Spotify in these selected months of the selected years. He also has it broken down so that we can kind of see things in the yearly view versus the monthly view. Again, kind of mentioning that he has this, we can look at it in minutes versus hours versus days. And all of the information really updates intuitively too. So for instance, if I selected only weekdays and then went back to the when he was listening the most, you'll see that this was also updated to only reflect the weekdays rather than including weekends too. So really, when I start to kind of think about the Spotify Wrapped, I think it's a fun, cute insight into my own listening habits. I scroll through once, maybe I screenshot my top songs, my top artists, and that's kind of it. And I think that Jurgen's project is really something more than that. It gives you so much interesting information about your true listening habits, or I guess in this case, his true listening habits, what you're listening to, when, on what device, what songs you're skipping the most, and even more than that. So this is definitely a dashboard that I would come back to over and over again if it was something that I had access to. I thought this was such an incredible project, so much fun, and just so full of information. And I thought he did a fantastic job with it.
I'm sorry, Lauren. I'm only noticing this now, although I did spend some time with this app. What happens when you click on change the look at the bottom? There's like blue, green, pink, white. Does it? Please tell me it updates the theme. Oh my God. Like this is amazing.
It's yeah, I mean I had it in pink for most of the time that I was playing around with it. But there is so much information to share and so many things to see here. I kind of had to focus in on the things that were like more data related. But even that, it's just it's really just an incredibly well done, really well thought out project. Um,
That shows the attention to detail. I also like the heat map. Most people went with the, default sort of hourly hourly granularity, which doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense for a project like this. Uh, so yeah,
yeah,
quite a
and
big
one other
fan of
thing that
that.
I kind of forgot to mention here too, just because there is so much information, is that he also created this help kind of page. So there's a lot of information here too, but it kind of helps give you an idea of, okay, this is where you're going to go to do X, Y, and Z, which I thought was really, when I first started clicking around, it was really helpful just to kind of see all the thought behind it and all of the things that I was able to do here.
I think for me, the standout thing here is just completely outside the box approach, right? I think most entries were either like a play on the Spotify app, right? You'll see a lot of like the greens with like the black background, or a play on the Spotify Wrapped, right? Which I guess kind of was like what you mostly interpret from the prompt. Like, all right, I'm going to do the Spotify Wrapped like they do it, but slightly different. And this is just like completely its own thing. I never in a million years would it would have occurred to me to do this, and I think it makes it incredibly cool. So yeah.
Yeah, it's very impressive. I've definitely never seen anything like this before, and could only imagine the amount of work required to put this together.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I mean, yeah, it's incredibly creative. There's just something so special about the feeling when you press the power button. Like I imagine we all got to the same point where we look at it and we're like, what's going on? And then just intuitively you like click the power button and it feels like you're, yeah, like kicking off an album or something almost. And all the insights come to life. Yeah, I don't have a ton to nitpick. It's a lot of information in a single view, but I think the creativity and technical work behind this is outstanding. So really well done.
I'd say the only thing, and this is nitpicky, I would have liked to seen more in the about how it was made. I know there's a pretty high level overview, but I would have liked to see a little bit more detail. I don't think that takes away from the project at all. Just something I would have liked to see more of.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love reading about how people make their projects, especially something like this, where it's like, this is tempting me to go and take our Power BI courses, so that I can do something as cool as this. So it would be great to kind of see some of the insight into how he actually created it.
Yeah, it's always a good sign when data nerds are like, whoa, like I want to see your code immediately, or like, your back end, because this is like blowing my mind. Yeah. All right. So we have Wouter Selis, another great entry here. I'll skip over the dashboard for a second. I really loved his write-up. It's very concise, a little bit styled with some emojis and just, nice, pretty bullet points, but very logical walkthrough of the goal, the approach, tools used, and then the dashboard layout itself. So nothing like super exciting to call out, but I will say like it was very easy to understand every element of this by following his walkthrough. And if you weren't able to get the Power BI to work, you can see every single slide. But let's go ahead and dive into the dashboard. So one of the things I really like about this project is that Wouter used the Spotify API to pull in the high quality images, as well as a little bit of other metadata about the tracks. Like the last project we saw, this includes all the years, so you can kind of generate a wrapped. One of the fun things about this is that there's a kind of a year over year comparison. So it's just a single card here, but it's just saying like, how did your listening in this year compare to the prior year? So if we were to switch to 2023, we'll see this green icon and we'll see that it was a jump from the prior year. But as we do this, all of the other information changes. But this was very much in the style of a traditional Spotify Wrapped, right? Kind of focuses on what was your top artist, top 5 artists, songs, with this first view being focused on the artist. So that's one tab. Second tab is focused on songs. And the very cool thing, you probably saw that load, is that you can actually play the song from this app. So it would play in my headphones. It won't be able to share it, but I'm listening to Lord of the Rings. And then I actually need to refresh this because I can't get it to stop. One second. But the other cool thing about that view as it loads again is that it allows you to look at both number of listens, so unique listens, as well as aggregate time, which are 2 very different metrics. So for example, in 2024, there were 483 hours, with Lord of the Rings being the most time. But if we do listen, then we can see a much shorter song. This ABBA song was played the most. So it's a really nice way to look at songs, because you might think about it as what was on in the background versus, what was I really going back to in terms of playlist. And again, we have these year-over-year metrics here. But you can just DJ for yourself on your Spotify Wrapped. That's not too bad. And then finally, the third tab, it's just some additional metrics. So if you really wanted to dive deep, you get your top genre, and then you have a bar chart of listens by genre here, and then whether or not you skip that song. So you can see skips by genre, which is fun. We have songs listened by season. Maybe not the question I would ask necessarily, but autumn was the most popular season for 2024. And then finally, we have platform. So Android versus Mac, which is kind of a fun way to think about how you listen. Am I listening on my phone, or am I listening on my PC? So just a few other ways to think about this data. But I think the technical work, he used Figma for the imagery here. And the connection to the Spotify API with Python was a really nice way to enhance the data present and add a really polished feel to this. So that's Wouter's work there.
I love this. One of the things that I thought was really cool that I actually was thinking about in Jurgen's project was that I wish there was some kind of comparison year over year, or month over month or something. And obviously I see a little bit of that in Jurgen's, but I think it's a much more clearly painted picture here, where it's quite obviously, there's a red arrow indicator, and then it tells you exactly what the decrease is. So I thought that was a really cool addition, just to kind of get an idea of, what is this year like compared to last year. So I thought that was a really great addition to this project.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I was going to say that I definitely like the use of the Spotify API to bring in the pictures. That's really nice. That's something that I would have liked to have seen in more projects, and that was a good use of that here.
Not a lot to add here. I think I agree, Lauren. I love the year-over-year comparisons. It's one of my biggest pet peeves when I look at my Spotify Wrapped, because it's giving me all these numbers, and I want to know how it compares. And the fact that you can go year by year and kind of intuitively see how your tastes have changed as you kind of scroll through, which I think was a nice implementation. Overall, very simple, but I think a lot of people tried to include too much. And I'd even argue some of those, to your point, Chris, right? Like the autumn winter view was even something that could have, not been here. But the first 2 tabs in particular, and the fact that you can listen to the song, just really cool. So yeah, I love this one.
I think really everything is already said. I love the fact that you can play the song directly from here. And to your point, Enrique, there is something about the simplicity, right? If you think about the concept of a wrap year in review, if you will, it shouldn't necessarily be too detailed.
Awesome. Yeah, I think overall, if we think about that, the prompt, it just nails the main pieces, which is a Spotify Wrapped, contains a lot of the information in that, adds a few extra twists that really, I think, helps make it blossom into an awesome data viz project as well.
So Marián did an excellent job. Before I dig into the report itself, which is really great, want to kind of go through the about section. So I like the way he laid everything out, started with a purpose, but he explained the data, some of his transformations. There was some fun stuff to learn about here, like his use of JSON files. He kind of shows the final data set and some info on the report, and even some of the more interesting DAX measures he used, an HTML measure down here. So I like that he used a few different languages and a few different ways to put this together. And one thing that I learned from reading this that I wonder if some people missed, as he talks about it here, is this little wrapped icon takes it to a different like mobile view that actually shows it as a Spotify wrapped. So I'm going to start there. So you click that, it takes you to a traditional looking Spotify wrapped, which I think is really cool. So the number of minutes listened to, I like the percentage factor too. In full disclosure, I didn't even look at my Spotify wrap, so I don't really know how it looked for this most recent year and how close this is to that, but I've done it in years past. And this looks really good. Just 18 days without using Spotify, average streaming minutes, favorite artist, of course, as well as top song. And then let's dive into the report so you could view the report from here. So I thought that was great. I didn't notice that until after I had already looked at that. And to me, that was kind of like an icing on the cake to an already great dashboard. I almost would have encouraged putting it up higher so as not to be missed, but I'm glad I read through the entire about section to not miss that. But looking at the dashboard itself, I mean, great UX UI. I think that the layout's great. It kind of reads like Spotify. Like if especially if you had like the desktop version open, it looks a lot like Spotify. I think it's user friendly. The interactivity is great. I think it's easy to read and understand what's going on. Like good use of color. The aesthetic is great, but it's very functional as well. And you can get some pretty great level of detail. So we could look at number of streams as well as the minutes and everything, filters. And then in the categories, we have the wrapped view here, of course, and we can look at specific tracks. Couple things I'll say here is the streaming timeline. I think the contrast could be a little better. It's tough to see the months, but I love that this is here because it does show a year by year comparison. I know the primary objective was to show for 2024, but I personally really liked that multiple years are in here, and I like seeing the trend. Well, this is a monthly trend, but you can filter by year rather. So it's nice to be able to see kind of how it was done, or how his listening was over time. Another thing, first stream, like January 1st, maybe not the most helpful metric, but I did like some of these other metrics, like typically streaming on Thursday morning, like that's cool, and then you have all the tracks here. You could filter to artists as well. And when you click on each one, you get top song. So again, like really great level of detail. And then podcasts as well. With some of the familiar data over here. And then there's a back button too, so you can kind of navigate back to where you were previously. So yeah, overall, like I think it's a really nice layout. It shows me the things that I would be the most interested in seeing from this kind of data. And I think it's super easy to navigate. I think it really nails the prompt. And then one more just little nice feature is up here. This links to his LinkedIn profile, just like a nice little bonus thing. So yeah, I think an excellent job overall.
Yeah, this was probably the one that I liked the most in terms of ratio of functionality and just pure information presentation. As we rolled out the challenge, I didn't envision a lot of interactivity in these final results, right? Just because of what it is. In my mind, I was expecting people to come up with infographics and stuff like that. This sort of has a very, very, very nice I didn't like some of the entries that were very filter heavy, slicer heavy, and had a lot of almost like an app level functionality. But this one sort of for me hits the sweet spot, and it's really aesthetically pleasing. Also, by the way, I did miss the wrapped mobile view.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I like that you get the best of both worlds with that pure wrapped functionality, and then a deeper dive. I thought that was really clever way to like marry our prompt with this, data nerd need for super granular data. So that was really clever. And then I also just really like the fact that his own data was used. I saw plenty of Lord of the Rings from Enrique. Just kidding, it's teasing a little bit, but it was fun to actually see another version of this with fresh data and fresh artists, and just get to know about one of the contestants in a way that just that personal aspect for something like this is really fun. That's why this is such a popular social media share for people at the end of the year, is because they're sharing with the world their music. And I understand that not everybody might listen to Spotify, but I think there's a couple of brownie points for having your own data and sharing that with all of us. So that was really cool too.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say the other thing that they added, because they downloaded their own data, because when we uploaded ours to the playground, we just did the songs, not podcasts. But the fact that they included that piece here, which was already in the download for everyone else that did it, like I know Jurgen from the finalists used their own data. We'll see it, Kai Wei as well. It was cool just seeing that like music to podcast ratio and that other separate tab. And one interesting thing that I liked about this one, as you go through like tracks, artists, I thought like instead of using like the heat map for like times of days, like just like this is when you listen to the most, it's actually pretty neat, right? Like typically on a Thursday morning, but if you click on a song, especially with your own data, like yourself, it'll change, right? Like, oh, you listen to these on Sundays or afternoon. So I thought that was clever, especially like going to podcasts and seeing Monday morning typical, like just those distinctions between songs. I don't know. I thought that was a clever way of using the time and date, like date time field that not a lot of people used as creatively, I think. So yeah, I missed the rap version too. I agree with you, Chris, and it's the best of both worlds. And I feel like I wasn't giving this one enough credit before we came into this meeting, and now I'm like, oh my goodness, I really like this. Yeah.
Yeah, even for me, when I was I was initially impressed, but the more I dug in, I became increasingly impressed the more I looked at it.
Awesome. So I am going to review Kai Wei's project and a couple of things, sort of like maintenance. I'm not a Spotify user. I've actually never touched that app in my life. That's number one. Number two, Kai Wei used his own data. And number three, he also used an API to enrich the data set a little bit. And so why this maintenance? As we launched this challenge, as I've said earlier, I had a vision of what a final entry would look like. I never, as I've said, I've never seen a Spotify wrap, but I have an idea of a concept of a year-end review. And to me, it was this like very high-level infographic style deliverable that isn't necessarily overly complex. With that in mind, I realized that it might be a challenge for people to sort of differentiate in that scenario. And what I like about Kai Wei's entry, it does so in a couple of ways. First off, if you read through the About the Project section, like there is the key piece is this approach subsection here where he sort of outlines what his vision is for the final presentation. So you will see overall listening, and then tracks, artists, albums, and listening patterns. Most of this stuff is very common, right? But then as you continue reading, he has screenshots for folks who aren't able, although I will say that this is the first time that I've seen somebody use PowerPoint in one of these challenges. Typically, people go for big database tools. To me, it was very interesting. Again, lends itself to the fact that the final work isn't overly complex, and the choice of tool also reflects that. So he goes through all of these sections, and at the bottom here, there's actually a lot of technical deep dive. right? And not a lot of this stuff ended up in the final report, which sort of tells me like he really, really dug into this. And the simplicity, the resulting simplicity is by choice, which it so really resonated with me. I particularly like this. There is a section around here somewhere where he sort of explored different metrics. Turns out if you play a song on Spotify and then manually rewind it back before it has ended, the metadata about the total milliseconds played is going to keep adding up. But the count will still remain one. So you can technically bloat your listening time even without increasing the number of streams you actually had. And so again, a lot of that stuff didn't make it to the finished product, but it's great to see that he sort of really dug into this stuff even beyond. I'm not saying we should add necessarily points for the extra technical, because this is clearly above and beyond. But I did like the fact that he dedicated so much time and effort to sort of then just filter down the final result. And the final result really is simple. Let's see what's the best way to do this. I'm going to try playing this. There is no sound. It's just a PowerPoint presentation. And let's just walk through these. So we start with the typical, overview. I would have liked to see hourly result or something a little bit more manageable for a human brain, like 23,000, 24,000 minutes is kind of difficult to wrap your head around. In my opinion, hours would have been better. But then we see this high-level annual breakdown, which sort of adds a layer of context that is missing in so many of these entries, where we can understand how his preferences have changed over time. There are some very clever comments, and this is the second piece that I really wanted to outline. It's not just the dry top, bottom, best, longest metrics. In every one of these, you're going to see a little bit of an extra derived measures. Like there is this comment, your top 5 songs are all recent. So comments like this made me sort of really stood out to me, because it's very nuanced, but it's just enough different from a lot of the other things that it stands out. And if I'm honest, to me, it's very useful. Moving on, I don't know if I should. It's pretty short, but maybe I can. Okay, so we have the top artists, and then I like this next one because it shows, for example, of those top artists. Now we have the best one, the highest one, how it trended over time, and we get this additional information that it has been sharply on the rise in the previous couple of years. So it's stuff like that. So it's stuff this is another good example. 37% of your total listening time is with your 5 top artists. So it's a simple context, but it tells us a lot more than just pure numbers or pure charts on a piece of screen. Let me see. He has another one which is really cool. Okay, so oops. So we have top albums, and again, one piece of interesting information, like focus on this number 2, Armageddon. And so, right, we can see in this screen that this album ranks very highly, but that rank is driven by just these 2 songs. Again, a layer of deeper understanding of what's going on with these listening habits. So I know I butchered this quite a bit. I invite everybody to, it's a minute and a half, just go through it. It's very simple, yet very creative and interesting. Overall, it really stood out as an awesome project from Wei.
I loved the the breakdown of like your top five versus the rest of your artists. I think that that's not something that we saw a ton. A lot of people kind of stuck with the basic, these were your top five artists. This is how much you listened, the end. And I really love that Kaiwi kind of went the additional step and said, okay, well, compared to the rest of the artists, how much of my listening time did my top five artists make up? And, yes, this is my top album, but why was it my top album? And I thought that that was a really, really cool additional piece of information that maybe wasn't missing from other projects, but I thought that it was visualized in a way that made a lot of sense in Kaiwi's project. So that was awesome.
Yeah, I like the focused simplicity that you mentioned, Bronislav. I think, I'm probably one of those that like when I initially looked at it, took for granted the simplicity, but when you dig in there and you look at the like the about section and kind of see what's going on under the hood, it's really nice.
Yeah, exactly. It's for me too, when I was looking at these entries the first time around, I was like, okay, this is cool. A little bit more sort of, let's say, live way to present an information that a lot of the other people presented as well. But then when you read through all of that and read through all of the stuff that he sort of analyzed and tried to, okay, this is not good. That he sort of analyzed and tried to dig for some sort of patterns and when he listens to music and whatnot, you can see that there is a lot of work that went into it, and yet the final output is still very much like something you would expect from a rap.
Yeah, I feel a little biased towards this one because they approached it, I feel like the same exact way that I would have when we first launched the challenge. They did it like incredibly well. The one thing I'll say, not to pile onto everything else, is I think in the past when we talk about what makes a great project description, we've always pointed, for example, toward Gerard projects. Like, oh, if you want to know how to do that part of your project, take a look at his. I think this is like a gold star example of just like crushing it. It's so good. And it's just like in its flow, like it's top to bottom, right? Like at first it starts adding the context. And then the more you read, like if you want to, you get a little bit more up until the end where they add like the whole technical stuff if you wanted to. I think it's brilliant. I love that part about it.
Yeah, and I just love the creativity of the insights. I know it's been spoken to a bit, but one of the fun things about the Spotify Wrapped is they do surface some like interesting nuggets. Like there's obviously the top artists and whatever, but just the spin on those traditional metrics here, particularly as we get to the back half of this, are like really fun. And I think Bronislav, you were talking about a lot of the stuff that didn't make the cut, and how it was a clear sign that he went deep. But just the fact that it's like, hey, here's your top artist and how that's grown over time. And you can see that 2024, like you can see like the pattern of falling in love with a given artist is like so cool, so creative. And, I wouldn't have thought about a lot of these metrics. But I like that it's like your day is energized by these, your night is energized. There's just so many cool things that just took a lot of slicing and dicing. And I think really speak to this crafting of a unique narrative that is, he probably learned, like, it's so cool that he got to learn so much about his own preferences. And I would love to have this for my own. And maybe Spotify will see this and put some extra cool stuff in there for theirs. But yeah, this is really fun.
I'll start by saying that I think my sentiment with this entry with Massimiliano is that there's a lot of great things in here. There's also just overall a lot of things in here as well. So I'll actually start with the brief, which is actually the shortest part about it. And I'll just point out some of the cool stuff. Like we've seen with, I think, two other finalists, they did use the Spotify API as well to add a lot of cool context and just new metrics. And another thing I'll say, they use the data playground data set. And from the people that grabbed that, they were the only person that I saw across the entire challenge that actually adjusted the date time field, which was in UTC to begin with by default. That's how Spotify exports to it here, assuming that it came from someone in New York, which I think was a smart assumption, especially because if you did look at the heat map, the listening patterns made a lot more sense, right? From when people are awake versus like during the middle of the night, which is how you would have thought it was with UTC. So I'm glad they noticed that and they made that correction. And they were actually pretty close, right? Instead of Eastern time, it was actually Mountain. So not bad at all. And if I do go into the wrap, I'm actually going to launch it into, I'm actually going to launch it in Tableau Public just so we can see the full screen view. And again, you'll notice there's a lot here. I will say, I think once this loads, this first visual is kind of representative of the entire dashboard as a whole. Incredibly creative and unique, right? Like instead of using a line chart to show listening trends, it's this audio array, right? Which you're kind of like seeing the music in it, but just looking at it, I have no idea what it is, right? It says hover to discover more, and you get like, okay, X amount of minutes listened to this song. Once I kind of spent a little bit more time with it, I realized it's like total minutes listens by day. That's the trend we're seeing here. And you can, like, if you hover, like, try to get like unique songs that you listen to during that day. I think that context could have been added here somewhere, and it's not. And I feel like it makes you spend more time than you should. And again, that's a recurring theme. Like, it's really cool, but it's just like a little asterisk at the end. We got the top 5, like we do in most entries and most Spotify Wrapped. I like that it's a general top 5, and then you can, if you want, like go explore like unique years, which is pretty cool. And like other folks, well, not many, but you can, click on one, stop, click on this one, and then you can actually play that song in this little player here, and you can actually play it. It's nice. And again, there's a lot more stuff here. I think some of these visuals, like it's cool to explore the analysis, like trying to see here, like they added the genres. Oh, maybe we listen to different genres at different times, right? I don't think the insight is here, so maybe I would have not chosen to include this chart after noticing that. But again, I some of the ones I do like a lot, this like comparison of like popular versus highbrow artists, you can get the artist popularity from the API. So you can kind of see where this listener leans. It looks like they kind of evened out at around 75%, mostly popular people, and then about a quarter of the time, not so popular. Some other cool insights, I think, like songs I hate, love. So these are songs in your top 100 that you actually had high skip rates to. I think that's very clever, right? It tells, this happens to be with my data, so it tells me a lot. And you can actually like see it like, oh yeah, like I even remember the times I skipped it, because maybe it's one of those where like, I don't like listening to it. I'm on the speakers and I don't want other people to hear it or whatever, right? Or it's like the ones that I use for working, but not so much for other times. Some of the, an interesting one here, and I'll just point this one out. I wasn't planning to, but Bronislav, when you mentioned Kai Wei, that if you rewind a song, it means that you didn't actually listen to it again in terms of like how Spotify exported state. I was looking at this stuff and I just thought a lot of this, it's like the numbers felt short and some of the tracks didn't make a lot of sense. And that's because the repeat criteria here is that you have like the record of one song is repeated exactly in the next one. But like for that to happen, I'm getting overly complicated, and maybe Corinne, you can edit this part out, but like it just makes me appreciate Kai Wei's more, even though I'm talking about Massimiliano's. But I think the intent to show this was really cool. Final one that I love, songs I no longer love as much as I did last year. So these are ones that we listened to a lot in 2023, but pretty much stopped listening to in 2024. Again, biased because this is my data, but a lot of these like spark memories, right? Like this is a song that I danced to during my wedding. So it's like, yeah, it makes sense that I, listened to it a lot last year and have since stopped, right? So, like that made me like, I think that's what makes Spotify Wrapped. It gives it the potential to be very special. And it was very cool to see that here. So again, overall, some of the coolest ideas, in my opinion, in terms of like what the insights you can get from it are, like very creative use of all the fields here versus just like the stock analyses. But some of them I think do get lost just in terms of overall volume. Overall, very cool entry, very technically proficient, I'd say, with all of the things that they incorporated. And I'd be pretty proud of this project. So good job.
Yeah, I have to say, if you scroll down a little bit, Kai Wei, the project that I presented, he actually mentions in his write-up that he chose deliberately not to focus on the skipped songs because his idea was to focus on the stuff that he likes, right? And at the time, I thought it was really smart. I still think it is, because I didn't really see the immediate need to focus. But this I like. uh, this sort of breakdown of songs that you basically the songs that you gave the most chance to, right? We see the songs that he tried to listen over and over again, but end up skipping them, and that's very interesting way to approach this. I don't think I've seen anything like that. Now it makes me wonder why. Like, is it just you like a part of the song and then you skip the rest, or you want to like that song, but there is something about it that's it's very interesting.
Yeah, Enrique, I think you put this in a really good way where it's like this is so much information and a lot of it is really cool. The ones that you pointed out, like the songs I hate love, the chart with, the you loved this last year but not this year. Those are all such cool ideas that I didn't come across in reviewing a lot of projects. And I almost wish that he had chosen to focus only on those really cool, like maybe have the basics where it's, top 5, but then really choose some of these charts that like have meaningful insights, and I think that like you adding the context of, well, of course I listened to this song a lot in 2023. It was my wedding song, but not in 2024, adds to that. And obviously people don't have that insight until you share it. But I do think that like there's a lot of opportunity here to have a really interesting dash, and not at all saying that this wasn't already interesting. It just feels like it's so much information, and maybe being a little bit picky about the things that you choose to keep in here would kind of lead people to exploring it more. Like, somebody might not scroll almost all the way down to the bottom to see this really cool songs I no longer love as much as I did, because there's just so much information to get to in order to get there. So thought this is a great project. I really like it. I think that there's like so many small tweaks you could make that could make it even better, but it was really like so much great information in here.
Yeah, I think like along that line, I almost just think like one of the things that would help this the most is just like, don't make this a single page that feels very long, but like, for example, like the top 3 bar charts, those are filterable by year. And that allows us just to see like, the top 5 kind of things we would look for in Spotify rap songs, artists, etc. But then it's like when we go down to, I'm not positive they're filterable, but like songs I no longer love, like I think that's static just for this year versus last year. So there's like something to the effect of like breaking down these narratives. And we think back to Kai Wei's, where it's like it's a video of those most interesting narratives. There might be a middle ground where it's just using interactivity to kind of break these up and isolate each of these stories. Because I think when you do put it all on a single page, it's very easy to get lost in the sauce. But if it was like, hey, here's the bit, page 1 is high level metrics, page 2 is like, interesting insight, whatever the case is, but breaking it down a little bit, I think would help the user a lot there.
Yeah, not much I'd add. I think what everyone shared is like, I agree with that too. Really great charts and insights here. But I do think it's a little bit busy. Yeah, I like the unique approaches they took, and there's some really awesome stuff there.
Yeah, it's cool to see that all the finalists are very different from each other. I guess it's a good segue because that's all the finalists. Is everyone ready to vote? When I say 3, I guess we just say submit and see what happens. All right. 1, 2, 3. Wow. Is 1 vote missing? Or are we 5 people?
We are 5 people. Somebody didn't. I didn't. Sorry.
Oh,
we know it's going to go.
Yeah. All right.
We have to do this again.
So funny. Woohoo.
Fair enough. Yeah, there we go. All right. So let's, congratulations, Marián. Let's give him a round of applause. As the winner, you'll take home a free annual membership to Maven Analytics and a custom Maven Challenge winner t-shirt. So congratulations once again. If anyone's looking for more chances to improve their data skills, then make sure to check out our org chart overhaul data drill. We'll be posting our unstructured solutions here on YouTube in March, right in time for the next challenge. Now, as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more data content just like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.